Alexander Varn, welcome to the Veterans Voice podcast.
Hey, Taylor, thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, for sure, man. Why don't you tell everyone where you're from?
I am from Germany, actually, right now living in the Black Forest, in beautiful place in Germany. Originally, that's why I'm fairly accent-free. I'm a military brat, so half American, half German.
Can you greet us in German real quick? I just want to hear something.
Ja, natürlich, gar kein Problem. Taylor, danke, dass ich da bin und da sein darf und Grüße an alle, die uns zuhören.
Did you just make fun of me?
Exactly. No, actually, I said thank you that I'm on, that I can be on the show, and greetings to everybody out there listening to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, thanks again for coming on. You're a psychologist, a lieutenant colonel specifically in the German military, and we're going to get into a very niche subject within psychology and healing, which is equine therapy. Which is something you're very savvy with. So
my passion.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just start out before we dive deep into equine therapy. Just tell us about your professional experience as a psychologist.
Okay. Well, I finished my master's degree in psychology in 2000. I don't want to lie, 2002. So I started a bit late with psychology, but my master's was in clinical psychology on the one side, and on the other side it was work and organizational psychology. But within that, and that's just because my university didn't offer it, I did a focus, like my master's thesis and everything, on forensics.
Okay.
And
pretty diverse education.
Yeah, pretty diverse, and pretty much what happened was I just I couldn't imagine actually working as a therapist or whatever, and then all these cool shows about profilers and stuff came out, and I was like, oh man, that looks pretty neat. So that's when I started getting into forensics, and worked actually after that. My second job, we came over to the United States because my wife was here on a Fulbright scholarship. Worked at a inner city school in a large city with EC kids because they couldn't find teachers who were willing to do the job, so they tried a psychologist. And then when we went back to Germany, that was my first real job as a psychologist. I worked in the prison system for 7 years. Yeah.
Okay, wow, quite the career.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you want to call it. It was very interesting though. Actually, working with felons, and these were it was a maximum security prison, so the most difficult felons, it makes for, as a psychologist, it makes for very interesting subjects and study subjects, because you see a lot of diversity in human nature that you generally don't get to see. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. Well, something I ask pretty much every veteran that comes on the show is, what drew you to the military back in the day?
Pretty much growing up with the military, actually. It's so my father was special forces all the way through and through. My stepdad, and I didn't know that at the time, but he came back from Vietnam, and I was a year old when he came back, so I didn't know the difference. My mom always told me that. He came back with pretty bad PTSD. He was also a Green Beret. But so I grew up in the military environment, and then after that, I did a short time in the Marine Corps here, and then after the Marine Corps, decided on studying. Studied in Germany simply because it was tuition free, so that was a big advantage.
So you're in the U.S. Marine Corps?
Yes, U.S. Marine Corps. Yeah.
So you went through Parris Island.
Went through Parris Island, yes. I was born in Parris Island. That's where they make Marines.
Became a man in Parris Island.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. Not a California Marine, no, a real one. Sorry about that. No. And then actually during my studies, it was the first time I actually realized what post-traumatic stress disorder is, because obviously having a military background, there was a course offered on a syndrome, on problems that are related to people in military and first responder service. And I sat in there, and I'd not known anything about it. It was part of clinical psychology. And when they started talking about the symptoms and how they manifest, I was like, wow, I know this. I saw this every day. I grew up with this. So that's sort of, that was an area that the clinical part that aside from the forensics that I really looked into. Our problem with the military is in Germany is that the military is very unobtrusive. Germany is after its Second World War experiences, a very pacifistic society. Right. That means The military does not really officially, and a lot of schools won't allow it, believe it or not. They're not allowed to advertise for military service. They're not allowed to really propagate. And back at the time, there was still a mandatory service. So I asked, well, am I going to have to do any military service? But because of my Marine Corps time, they looked at me and said, no, you've done enough military service. You don't have to do it with the Germans. And that was the last thing I actually thought about until I was in the prison system, and I got pretty frustrated with the prison system. Just the work was very interesting, super interesting work, but it was just. I mean, the least amount of money you're going to drop on anyone pretty much in society is prisoners. So what happened was I was responsible for 120 prisoners. Then we opened up a new prison. We didn't want to, or the prison system didn't want to hire any new hires. So what they did was just increase the caseloads. So I went from 120 prisoners to 200 prisoners.
Wow.
And it's very frustrating. It's just you can't really do your job. I'd rely on the division head of the guards or whoever else and say, okay, was there alcohol involved? Was there this? Was there that? And without actually being able to talk to the prisoner and know the case, I'd start making suggestions or recommendations, and that was very, very frustrating. And then actually, the German military was actually overtly hiring. And so my mother-in-law actually found an advertisement for the German military, specifically for psychologists in the psyops field. And she said, so you're so frustrated, that might be something for you. And so that was definitely something for me. And that's when I switched back to the military and have not regretted it ever since. Really love it.
What a story. Yeah, I didn't realize it was the U.S. Marines you were in. That's wild.
Oh, yeah.
You served everywhere.
Well, no, not everywhere, but at least two places. Man. Yes, yeah.
Well, let's get into equine therapy.
Yeah.
I know your government, the German government, is very supportive with, not only researching, but standing up equine healing modalities like Remount Foundation. So how did this all start in Germany?
Well, it started in Germany pretty much. I think it started, and this was before I was involved. It started around 2015, and we have one center of research which is affiliated or belongs actually to our military hospital in Berlin. So we have four military hospitals, and the hospital in Berlin has our psychotrauma research center. And I'd say our head psychiatrist there at the time, he's obviously now he's in the Department of Defense, but he's still pretty much our expert on PTSD. He started noticing in the research that the classic therapies like EMDR and all these other things, so rapid eye movement desensitization, they work for military personnel, but not as well as they do for civilians. He noticed that there's always you get a betterment in symptoms, but you don't really get a 100% recovery.
Why do you think that is?
There's numerous ideas on that, and one of the ones that he propagates, and I think there's a lot to it, is the concept of moral injury.
Right.
The concept of, because, generally our soldiers and all soldiers, I know I was prepared for it as a Marine, you don't know how it's going to be in live, but it was, the firefight was not something you didn't want, it was something you wanted pretty much, right? Yeah. So it's not like, that's something that happens out of the blue, like you would have in the civilian situation, the classic thing. You're going into, you're a young lady, you park your car in a parking garage, you think everybody is nice in the world, you're done with whatever you're doing in the evening, go there, get beaten up, beaten to a pulp, raped, and all of a sudden think, whoa, the world as I thought it is not what it is.
Right.
People are evil and mean, and that's sort of the classic kind of PTSD, and that's not really something that happens for soldiers, because like I said, most soldiers are trained. Ideally, they actually, they want to get off the training ground and onto the battlefield to actually see, hey, let me use the skills that I've been training so long to utilize.
That was well said. That's a really good perspective because one, in the military, like you said, you're training to be a machine gunner. You're training to be a sniper, and you're doing things that go along with that job field. But the woman in the parking lot, she wasn't expecting that. And that would be post-traumatic stress. It's a traumatic event. But the machine gunner, he was saying hoorah the whole time and loved it.
Right.
But then later in life, you might have some moral injury, like you're saying. I think there's definitely a huge difference between moral injury and PTSD, like you're saying.
And I think that, those are the things that, and if you look at some of the studies, it gets really interesting. It's like, I forget it was Hogue. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But there was one study, for example, that looked at like, okay, if you look at the American study, 20% of service members in combat units and in combat, 20% usually come out with PTSD. And then if you start looking at the correlation when they started asking differentially of, okay, how was this firefight? How was it? And it was like, well, I utilized my machine gun against enemies.
Right.
Don't know who I killed, what I killed, whatever. Not very strongly correlated to PTSD. I used my machine gun. I saw him drop, a bit stronger. I realized that, I killed civilians, a lot stronger. I realized I killed women or children, a very high correlation. So I think what happens is that, I'm doing things that I'm trained to do. And I think that as long as I'm acting in my idea of what's okay, I don't think I'm that much of a danger. And once you start moving out and you realize, oh gosh, we just hit this compound and we killed a 6-year-old. That's a totally different story. And that's something that I wasn't prepared for, that probably does not coincide with my worldview, and something that is very hard for me to come to terms with.
Right.
And that's the whole moral injury part.
Yeah. So classic modalities, like you were saying, CBT, EMDR, those are treating more post-traumatic stress events.
Yes.
And this is how you're saying equine therapy is helping because it's treating more moral injury.
Well, yeah, it's the idea there was pretty much that, and this is how did we get into equine therapy as a military, I think, is that the military started looking at other possibilities of how can we get this. And don't quote me on the percentage, but let's say the number of, let's say 15% of symptoms you just cannot get rid of. How can we get those 15% of symptoms under control or get rid of them? And that's when our military started branching out and looking at different possibilities. What else could be utilized? And so we're looking, at service dogs as dogs. We're looking at horses. They actually did for a while dolphin therapy.
I've heard of that.
Ridiculously expensive.
I'm
That's
sure.
why, because we had to fly people to Curacao.
Oh wow, man, what a trip though.
Oh yeah, I think the psychologists and psychiatrists who sort of accompanied that, they were big proponents of it. I think
for
they
sure.
loved it.
Yeah, we'll go back anytime.
Oh gosh, I'd do it too. Yeah. So they started looking into different modalities, and the equine therapy. What happened there was anything that happens outside of our system. I'm sure it's the same with the Americans, with the American military. We have a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of red tape, and it's really hard to do things that are not mainstream. So if you go and say, we've got this idea, horses might help. There's not any pot of money anywhere in the military that says, oh yeah, this is validated. We can send somebody and look at it.
And mainstream, you would probably say using pharmacology and sending them to a therapist.
Right, and sending them to a therapist and trying for something new. There's not really anything prescribed for that. So what happens a lot of times in our military is our chaplaincy steps in. Because our military chaplaincy has money that it can allocate any way it sees fit. So what happened, I think, in the equine therapy thing is that I think it was actually a German lady who worked with equine therapy, Ia Gala, and American veterans. I don't know her. I would imagine she was probably married to an American service member, worked in El Paso, then came to Germany and talked to our military about, hey, you know, we've been using equine therapy with American service members. Why don't we try that in a couple setting with German service members? And the chaplaincy bought into that. So the chaplaincy was like, hey, that sounds like pretty cool. We have a need for it. Let's try that. And they have the money. And so what happened then is that they started doing that, and our psychotrauma center underfitted that with research. So they're like, okay, we're going to do that, but if we're going to do that, then we'll research it and see if it has any efficacy.
Yeah, I got to justify it.
Right. And so that's what happened. And actually the results were very, very good. So a significant reduction on the PCL-5, which is the PTSD checklist on symptomatology. So there was a significant reduction in symptoms through the use. There was also an increase in the quality of the relationship, and a reduction and an increase in the quality of life. So with those positive indicators, and I'm not sure who that was. It might have been Iagal at the time, talked to our Minister of Defense, our Secretary of Defense. That was Ursula von der Leyen, and I'm speculating all of this. So, and she's also a horsewoman.
Okay.
And she talked, and so she was like, okay, well, this sounds interesting, but if there's anything that we want to mainstream into the military, we're going to have to do a study on it. And so that's how the larger study that I actually participated in started up. And that's still ongoing. That study is still ongoing right now. And how I came into the study was actually a totally different part. I didn't even realize that we had equine therapy going on in the military. But I was helping a friend of mine who actually works with me now as the other part of the equine therapy team, Master Sergeant Hölzle, who was a scout sniper and then turned after 2014, after our deployment there, to Africa. He switched over into the softer side of things, I'd call it. He's the POC in his battalion for wounded warriors and helping them sort of manage the process of how do I get from not feeling well to getting my injuries documented, to navigating the system, to finding help, to finding a placement afterwards if I can't be healed, and all these things. So that's his focus now.
That's good. That's beautiful. Someone has to do that. Yeah.
And so working with him, because he said, you know, sometimes good to have a psychologist along for some of these things. And we knew each other really well from our deployments. So working with him, actually one of the wounded warriors that he was taking care of, he participated in this equine therapy project of our chaplaincy. And so the guys and gals that Jens is taking care of, they all knew me, and they knew that I was a horse person. I had horses. They knew I was a psychologist. And so one of them was the ones who actually spoke to me and said, you know, hey, Alex, why don't, you know, you're a psychologist, you've got horses. I just went through the best experience of my life. And a lot of times people over dramatize, I'd say that, but you know, he said it saved his life.
Right.
And I do believe it's very good at like breaking through plateaus and getting things started again. And anyway, said, and I went through this weekend, and it transformed my life. It saved me, and it was working with horses. Why don't you offer that? And so that actually got me onto the bandwagon of checking in on it, because I'd say any horse person knows that horses are good for people. I mean, you know, Winston Churchill said the outside of a horse is good for the inside of a man, and there's something to that. It's my go-to stress relief. You know, trail ride with one of my horses is my stress relief par excellence. But I'd never realized that you could actually do that in a formalized kind of setting. Anyway, so and then this was 2016, 2017, I had to deploy again. And after my deployment, I was offered a chance to come to the United States for a year.
Mm-hmm. And this is how you met our mutual friend, Billy Jack.
Exactly. This is how I met Billy Jack. Billy Jack at the time was the head of the equestrian center at the Air Force Academy, and had actually been utilizing horses with veterans, Wounded Warrior Battalion, but you know this as well as I do, since about 1999.
Yeah, long time. That's why I call him like the originator of equine therapy. So he was doing it back in the day before, like you said, you didn't even know it could be done formally.
Yeah.
But people were healing. People were escaping on the weekends, riding their horses and feeling better on Monday. We've just kind of professionalized it and turned it into an actual healing modality.
Exactly. So that's sort of, you know, and I think they started the healing modality thing probably around 2009 or 2011 at the Air Force Academy. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, so when they offered me the chance to go to the United States, and this is, I have my wife to thank for that as well. What happened was, because like I said, equine therapy for me was a bit on the back burner. I'd reached out to places, didn't hear anything back. And that's because probably, you know, I reached out with my official email, and a lot of equine therapy in Germany, I'd say, is a little bit more esoteric. They're a little bit more hippie-like, and Germany is a very pacifistic society. So there's a lot of skepticism when it comes to the military.
Yeah.
So,
Why do you think that is? You're telling me a little bit about that earlier, but you know, reaching out with a military email, and you think people were kind of judging you based on that?
Yeah, I think so. And the problem there is pretty much that, I mean, Germany in its history has started 2 world wars.
Sure.
And the cost of that has been immense, not only to the world, but to the Germans as well. And obviously we have the Americans to thank for helping to rebuild us with the Marshall Plan and all that. But I think that the Americans were very good at ensuring that we sort of became very skeptical about military and all things military.
Understandable.
And so, for example, the whole deployment situation with the German military it was during the Cold War unthinkable. I mean, Germany, we had a large military at the time of 500,000 people under arms, and we had a conscripted service, but it was all just to defend against the Eastern Bloc. Mm-hmm. And the idea of German military actually going into other countries actively was unthinkable. I mean, obviously that changed with the NATO responsibilities. It changed with the war on terror. But there are still, you know, even in Kosovo and whatever, it's been a long process for the German military to actually come to terms with the idea that, yes, we are actively deploying. We're actively deploying into combat situations and fighting again. Even, you know, obviously, even though that I'd say that the reasons for our fighting are definitely a lot. How should you say? They're positive now in comparison to what you look at in the Second World War.
Maybe.
Justified, yeah. But still, the whole idea of that is, and we had military personnel who joined back in the 80s, for example, who, when our first deployment started, who said, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. This is not my idea of military. So I think that's, we have a very, the German population is very skeptical about military.
Right. So at what point did you see them hop on board with equine therapy?
Our military?
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I think that the civilians, I think IAGALA, and that's American based, is and I think the idea behind it is, one, there can be a lot of money earned. I think that's one of the big motivators, and two, I think that obviously wounded warriors and doing something for wounded warriors is not. I think even some of your pacifistic groups can come to terms with that. But we have had the other side of things too. I mean, if you look at some of the folks on our extreme left, for example, who will say, you know what, you were injured in Afghanistan or wounded in Afghanistan, that's your own effing fault.
Yeah.
You didn't have to go there.
Yeah, I think we deal with that here as well.
So that would be the extreme. But I do think it's twofold. I think that some people who are more pacifistic can get behind the fact that, people are wounded and they need help. That's the one thing. And on the other side, everybody needs to survive. And I think that's an idea for some of the civilian places to help them support their equine operation, by having the government pay for equine therapy service. We're not that far yet. We're not there yet, but I think that was the motivation for the civilian side to actually get into it.
Right. Well, I want to get into the science and biology of equine therapy, but let's just start out with your broad definition of what equine therapy is, and then we'll get into the science behind it.
Okay, my broad
Probably should have started with that, but
my broad definition of equine therapy. That's a big one. I'd say I think if I were looking at it to break it down simply, it would be the use of horses to help individuals or assist individuals in their healing process. And that can take a multitude of different forms. And I think one thing that we're also looking at now more is the other side of it is the resiliency aspect. That's something that I'm also trying to push a bit for our side of things in the military, is that maybe we can also use it as a resiliency tool. So not only when as the Germans say, the child has fallen into the well, to help get it out, but to also help the child before it falls into the well, that kind of an idea. So that would be my broad definition. And I would encompass, whether you would call it equine therapy with, let's say, licensed therapists, equine-assisted learning, whether you put people on the horse in the form of hippotherapy, for example, with physical disabilities, or anything of that nature. So that's what I'd define equine therapy as that.
And hippotherapy, just to clarify, that's actually using the motion and swaying of the horse walking to kind of, feed into the human riding it to move their bones and joints, which helps them in turn, with back problems, hip problems, etc.
Or, for example, if you've had a stroke, to help your brain relearn the movements, make the reconnections in the synapses to relearn the movements of walking and these kind of things. Yes, exactly.
Well, just in regards to, let's stay on like the psychology aspect of it, being a psychologist. Where do we even start with the science and biology of equine therapy? How does it work? 1 hour later.
Exactly. Well, that's the $1 million question, actually. Yeah, it's something that we don't really know yet. What is the magic sauce? To quote one of the veterans I worked with at the Air Force Academy at USAFA, he said, it's just voodoo. And in part, it seems that way. In part, it just seems to be magical. There are different ideas behind it, and I think all of them bear merit. So again, I think it's probably multifaceted how the horse can assist. So the one thing, there's the idea of the heart and the magnetic fields of the heart. And that, the magnetic field of the heart of the horse is 5 times larger, at least, if not more, than the magnetic field of a human's heart. And that, that there's an in-syncing process. Maybe it's that, maybe not, but there definitely is the fact that the horse as a flight animal is a super fine-tuned animal to its environment. Anytime you watch horses, you'll always see, it's also very interesting for our wounded warriors. Horses are always on deployment. They're always in a combat zone because a horse is their flight instinct is ingrained. They know instinctively that they're a meal on a lot of different menus. And the horse generally has the attitude of reacting first and asking questions later. And because of that, I think that they're very, very fine-tuned, whether it's the heart or whatever else, in picking up vibes. of their environment, of what's going on. And there are studies that go to that. There's a study out where they actually put riders under duress in regards to, I think it was like at a tournament, and they said, okay, and a dressage or a English riding or jumping tournament, and to know that these are very high-strung horses. So if I tell a rider of one of these horses, I am going to shock you like crazy while you're on that horse sometime during the day, that will get the anxiety of that rider up quite well. And so what happened is, so what they said is, okay, we are going to douse you at some time with water. And they put heart rate monitors on the riders and the horses. And the horses don't know. I mean, they don't know what was told to the riders.
Yeah.
But they noticed an increase in the heart rate of the riders and a direct correlation and increase in the heart rate of the horses.
So the rider was wearing some kind of shocking device.
Well, no. So what they didn't do anything actually.
Okay.
So they were wearing heart rate monitors.
Right.
And all I'm going to tell the rider is that, you know what, sometime during the day, during the tournament, during whatever, when you're working on your horse, I am going to hit you with a fire hose of water.
Okay.
And if I have a high-strung, even if I don't have a high-strung horse, if something like that happens, I know that I'm going to have a bit of a Western rodeo.
Okay, I see.
And unless I'm a bronc rider, that's usually something that I'm trying to avoid as a rider.
Right.
So that will up the anxiety rate. And it didn't only up the heart rate of the rider, it also upped the heart rate of the horses.
Interesting. Okay. So in a way, it's part of a study. It was an objective way to increase the anxiety or stress of the rider. They're fearful of being shocked, even though it didn't happen.
Right.
But they're fearful of this all day for hours, and you could actually see the horse react to that.
And that's and that's something, again, that you know as a rider. It's riding is very counterintuitive. Or working with a horse, that means if a horse is getting stressed and anxious, I have to start getting calm because that horse feeds off of me. And it's something, and I'm sure we'll get into that you can see in the equine therapy work that we do as well. So I think that's one of the things that a horse actually gives a person direct feedback on what's going on with me inside.
I see.
So that's probably one of the things. For example, it's and if you lose that connect, and a lot of veterans with PTSD, for example, have that disconnect. You know, you don't want to deal with your emotions because you're scared of being overwhelmed by these emotions. So I sort of try packing them away, and what happens is I lose the connect to those emotions, except when they get super strong.
Right.
And so I don't really know what's going on inside of me, and horses show that. We've had situations, so we'll usually do like a 6-week regimen with the soldiers. We've had situations where we spent 6 weeks getting the soldier to get calm enough inside that the horse would even allow itself to be touched or groomed.
Wow.
Or we had one that was, a meet and greet the herd situation. One veteran is like, I love horses and this is great. And he'd been in a process already of therapy, and he knew horses as well. And he was there with his wife. It was a couples therapy. And he was like, yeah. And his wife was like, yeah, the horses, they love him. They don't love me. And he's like, yeah, I'm really cool with horses. And he went into the herd, and none of the horses wanted anything to do with him.
So you can actually see, like, someone walks in and the horses are kind of walking away from
Oh,
them?
yes, that can happen. And that's the other thing that's different, like to a dog, in my opinion, is that dogs are so domesticated through us that they have the aim to please. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, they always say that what's the difference between, a person and a dog is put your wife in a trunk for 3 hours and open it up and see what happens. Put your dog in a trunk for 3 hours and open it up and see how you're greeted. You know, it's sort of...
they're always happy.
They're always happy. They're like, oh gosh, you're saving me, right? And so dogs are, they aim to please and horses don't. So if a horse... And that one of the first things I learned riding is that my riding instructor way back in the day said, if you go out to pasture and you try to get your horse and your horse doesn't want anything to do with you, ask yourself, what was your last interaction like with the horse? Because they don't come up to you then. They will, of course, but if they say you're a bad dude or what you've been doing is not cool, they will turn their butt to you and walk off.
I see.
And so anyway, this happened with him, and he was like, man, oh, what's up? And I'm like, well, how are you feeling right now? And he's like, well, I don't know. I've been having a rough couple of weeks and everything else. And I was like, well, did they teach you any, do you have any tools to get yourself in a better space here and now, anything with mindfulness, or what did they teach you? And he said, well, I sort of taught me Tai Chi and stuff. I said, well, then my suggestion, go off. It was outside. I said, go off, do maybe 15, 20 minutes of Tai Chi or 30 minutes till you think you're in a good place. And then we'll try it again with the horses. And he did, and it worked.
Wow.
So he came back, and then the horses were like, yeah, okay, you can pet me and everything else. So they give you a direct feedback right there of what's going on inside of you.
Yeah. I think even just to sidetrack a little bit, human to human, we can feel this too. Yes. I don't know if you can, but like if I'm around an anxious person, you can feel it. But if I'm around a cool, level-headed, grounded, down-to-earth person, I can feel that too. So like you're saying, I think that probably comes from the heart, our magnetic field from the heart. It's radiating that emotion, those feelings. Yes. And if ours is 5 times smaller than a horse's heart, because their heart is how big? Probably 15 pounds or something.
Probably, yeah.
They can feel it much more than we can. And then we can also feel the horses.
Oh, yeah.
So I wonder if horses are just kind of in this steady state of calm. Like you said, they're prey animals, so they want to just be this kind of submissive, calm, healing type energy.
Well, what horses do, and I think that's one of the big takeaways that we do. We always do this with our folks. So the first thing that we do is like a herd observation, and what we do in a herd observation is we'll bring aversive stimuli into the herd, so that that our soldiers can watch what do horses do when aversive stimuli happens. And the big takeaway for a lot of them is when they're watching the herd at first. It's a lot will say, "Hey, man, they've got like a 360-degree security perimeter," and they do. If you look at horses, watch them, you'll see that they're watching every angle.
Yeah, they're prey,
and not every horse is at the ground at the same time, and everything else they've got everything sort of covered. And so they're like, "Yeah, this is sort of like an FOB, or a cop." And then we bring the aversive stimuli in. And, it's usually very dramatic when you're not used to horses and you see the horses sprint off somewhere and then they'll watch. And the interesting thing, though, is that they'll, as Greg Kirsten, one of the equine therapists, says, they'll recircle. So what happens is they'll do their flight distance, which is about 400 yards maybe. And then they'll watch that stimuli. And they'll watch that stimuli and say, okay, something happening or is nothing happening? Then, they'll run first and then they'll ask questions. And if nothing happens, then they'll sort of recircle towards that thing again. And then usually some of the younger ones out of the herd, they'll get a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And if nothing happens, then sooner or later, they'll actually interact with that stimulus, be it a ball or whatever, until they figure out nothing's there. And once that happens, they go from 100% on to totally relaxed again. And that's sort of like the second takeaway for our soldiers is that they're always in a combat environment. But once they do realistic threat assessment, and once they've assessed that there's no threat, they're back to calm. And you have been out of the combat environment. Your threat assessments are not realistic, and you can't find calm anymore. But if a horse can do it, you should be able to do that too. So that's sort of their second takeaway, right?
I see. Yeah. I mean, this kind of applies to everyone right now. I just think, society, the world in general is very chaotic. We're always kind of worrying about something, the next war, the next, pandemic, the next whatever. And the horses are probably feeling that. We're worried about the next thing. We're not doing realistic threat assessment like you're saying. You might be worried about, something at work, your boss or something like that, but you're coming home, you're carrying that. Now you're affecting your spouse. Now you're affecting your children. You're never really letting that go. You're never calming down. So it sounds like horses have really good emotional management.
They do, and that they don't ruminate on things, and that's the main thing. They're in the moment, and that is another takeaway for a lot of soldiers is that okay, who knows? The horse is not worried about tomorrow. It's another nice thing about interaction with a horse is usually, unless you've proven yourself to be a major a-hole, you're always beating the horse or whatever. a horse is forgiving. They're always going to confront you with a clean slate.
They're living in the present.
They live in the present, and it's actually the only thing that interests the horse at that moment is what is happening in the present. And so once they calm back down, the grass is good, right? The sun is shining,
right?
Why should I worry about whether the grass is not going to be here tomorrow, or whether the sun is not going to shine, or whether it's going to rain, or what? Horses don't do that,
man.
And we do, or we hold grudges from the sun is shining today, but yesterday it really sucked, and the day before it did too. And so who knows how long this is going to last, and so we're not living in the moment.
Yeah.
So that's what horses, and I think animals in general do that. They live in the moment.
So from a psychologist perspective, why do you think humans do that?
Because we have big brains.
We think too much.
We think too much and we overthink too much. Yeah. Yes. And we're very good at modeling. I mean, that makes for wonderful things. I mean, you have to imagine a spacecraft. You have to imagine space travel before you can travel to space, right? And we can do that. And so that's the positive, but that also means we're capable of imagining worst case scenarios.
Right.
I can sit here and imagine, probably when I drive home, who knows, I might have an accident, and tomorrow I've got to go see the doctor, and there might be a super bad diagnosis, and who knows, and my job situation is iffy right now, and so I can imagine all these negative things as well, and that's our problem. So our big plus is also probably our big minus.
Yeah. I've thought about this a lot recently. Like, the more technology progresses, like you're saying, we can imagine going to Mars, the stress that comes with that as well. Like, as far as we're imagining technology can progress, our worries are going to follow that.
Of course.
Yeah. Man.
And a bit we're the Wizard's Apprentice, right? We're opening things and we don't know what we're doing sometimes. And it's like, I might get that back into Pandora's box, right? But yeah.
So do you have any other theories as to why equine therapy works?
Yes. Another big thing is the modeling. So to give you an example, one of the things that we do is what Greg Kirsten and OK Corral series calls life's little obstacles. The Germans call it, where am I here? Where am I now? Where do I want to be? And you can use that, and you can use that obviously in a therapeutic setting. You can use that as a coaching setting. But what you do is you imagine a problem that you're working on, and you imagine, where do I want to be? So let's say for a lot of our soldiers, it might be, I want to be well. I want to be whole again. So that's a big thing. But so that's their goal. And where are they now? So those are the two first spots that they define. So we use all kinds of materials that you can find. It doesn't matter. Chairs, it can be jumps, it can be poles on the ground, whatever else. And they'll sort of set up, where do I want to be? And where am I now? And what's stopping me from getting from A to B? So what is the problem? Why can't I get from A to B? What are the obstacles? What do they look like? And then they'll sort of set these obstacles up, and it can be, and is it an obstacle? How does that obstacle feel? Is it something that's surmountable or insurmountable? So do I make like a 12-foot or 8-foot jump that I know a horse is not going to be able to do? Or do I make, so it's something I'm going to have to navigate around, or is it something that I can break through? Or what do these obstacles, what are they? And so that whole process already, I think, just helps people envision better what their problem is, what it looks like, and what could be in the way. And then what we have them do then is they navigate the from A to B with the horse. And that can do a number of different things. So I'll try and give you examples that might be easier to understand. So for example, we have one veteran, or one soldier, active duty actually, so in our military, we have a process. So you raise your hand pretty much and say, "Hey, my last deployment, I don't know. I can't sleep anymore. I'm aggressive at home. I've lost my motivation to come to work. I've been drinking more than I should. Whatever. I have some problems." And so what happens then is you go into an assessment, diagnostic assessment, and the whole 9 yards. And then sooner or later, they'll sort of determine your disability level of where you're at. And important for a lot of our soldiers is like the 30% disability rating, because that gives you certain advantages. And there's a lot. There's a lot. That's why my buddy Jens, that's his job now, is to help people navigate that system. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. And so we had one soldier, for example. So he was like, yeah, okay, I want to be whole. I want to be well. So that's where he set up. He set up his little goal. That's where I want to be. And this is where I am now, sick. And then he started setting up his obstacles. What's keeping me from getting me well? And it was, well, I don't have the disability rating yet. They haven't decided on, whether the traumatic incidences that I've given them are traumatic enough or not. It's not sure. And what kind of a retraining program I'm going to be going into. So it was all kinds of things that had to do with this system, but nothing that had to do with him getting well. And interestingly enough, he set it up so you had the starting point, and in a straight beeline, the goal. And to the left and to the right, he built the obstacles, 5, 6 different ones. And so he would stand there, okay, these are my obstacles. And he said, and I'm not going to lead the horse. I'm just going to unhook the horse, and I'll try to navigate all this with the horse not on a lead line. And so he unhooked the horse, and this is sort of the voodoo or the magic of it too. So he unhooks the horse, and the horse beelines it straight from his start to the goal, goes right through, ignores all the obstacles on the left, on the right, goes through the goal, parks himself there, and starts eating grass. And that was his big eye-opening moment where he's like, man, I guess all this stuff doesn't have anything to do with whether I get well or not. And we're like, yeah, it doesn't, does it?
Huh.
I mean, whether they give you a 30% disability or whether they give you this or that has nothing to do with you being well. That's just describing something.
Yeah.
And if they give you that, you haven't come any further in the process of getting back to where you were before.
Interesting. So if I understand this correctly, you have the horse at point A, you have a goal of getting to point B, and you might put 3 or 4 different obstacles that you assign meeting. So I'm an alcoholic. I was in firefights in Afghanistan. I'm angry with my family, and then 1 or 2 more. So then when you're walking with that horse through these obstacles, you're really trying to assign that, you just put a trash can there, and that's your alcoholism. You might start feeling that resentment, and the horse is now feeling that, pulling you away from that obstacle. Oh, I see how this is
so
working.
What happens there, and that's the interesting thing too, is, for example, okay, let's say, so most of our soldiers, they don't have equine experience. Right. So they'll make obstacles where they're not obstacles for a horse. So they'll say, okay, so we've got like these jumping poles. They're maybe 5, 6 inches in diameter, and they'll put that down as an obstacle. Boom, on the ground. And all our horses, and we tell it to them then too, they can walk over these things. I mean, they don't even think twice about it.
And that's the lesson, right? You can just walk over your obstacles.
You can walk right over it.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, but they assign meaning to it. And the interesting part is how intense that can be. So as part of the study, we did heart rate monitoring. And like, for example, one of our special forces guys, he and obviously, they're trained to work the problem. I'm not telling you anything new, right? So he actually managed the obstacles fairly well, even the ones that he had assigned meaning to. And we were like, man, you did a really good job. And he's like, yeah, man, but this was hell. This was hell for me. Goodness. And we're like, really? And then he showed us his heart rate, and he was at 240 beats per minute.
Holy shit.
So
how much does he weigh? That's dangerous.
He was in good shape.
Okay. Yeah.
But you can tell right there that so that's happening with the soldiers at some of these obstacles. And what happens with a horse is, but for him, again, you could see the special forces training. It was not an option to balk. It was like, work the problem, go through, get rid of it, Right. So he moved through, and the horse did follow him. But for most horses, what happens is they'll be walking with the soldier, and they see a pole on the ground. And it's like, that's easy. But this human next to me, man, he's got a heart rate of 230, 240. He's tense. There's all kinds of things. He's probably smelling really bad,
Yeah.
And so the horse is saying to itself, I am missing something here, and will absolutely refuse to cross this 6-inch diameter pole. They'll pull in the other direction. They'll dance around it. They'll do everything, but they will not go over this pole.
Wow. I see how this is working. Is it ever difficult? Because it sounds like, in order for this to be absolutely effective, you have to truly give meaning to that pole that's on the ground. And you have to experience the emotion that you feel when you're out in real life screaming at your family. When you're near that pole, you have to feel that same emotion. So have you ever heard of brain spotting?
No.
No. So it's a technique used by a lot of counselors, I believe, but they essentially give you a spot. Sometimes they have a little stick with a knob on the end for you to look at, and you're trying to work through a past experience. I think it's more PTSD driven. So, for example, just a military soldier, maybe he killed a civilian, and that doesn't sit well with me. So feel the emotion that you felt when you killed that civilian or whatever the experience would be. So feel it. And now look at this stick, and then tell me when it gets more intense, and tell me when it gets less intense. And he might move up and down all throughout your field of view. And then when it's at peak intensity, you just sit there and you just stare at that point and you try and feel that emotion. So it's kind of like a desensitivity type thing. But I wonder if doing this type of brain spotting first, so you're really attuned to, because sometimes it's hard to bring those emotions up effectively and actually experience them in real time, because you're just with a horse in a stable. You're not in the experience. But I wonder if doing something like this to kind of prime the brain a little bit before going into equine therapy could make it more effective.
Maybe. The interesting thing is, it's, like I said, heart rates of 240.
That's a lot.
I think you don't need that. We're always amazed at, I've just the last session that we've had, the last sessions with one of our soldiers. So he built up, his obstacle course of like, okay, this is me after deployment. This is me realizing I have a problem and admitting the problem, and this is my navigation to where I'm at now, and then going further. And even that, after he built it up, he was like, gosh, that's just so strenuous. And then he actually needed the horse's support, walked away with the horse before he could actually navigate into it. Simply, so I think we're really good, and that's why we don't tell people where to go or what to think about, or this is your problem. They find it for themselves.
I see, yeah.
And the meaning they ascribe to it, it gets that intense meaning. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing when, like I said, I worked in the prison system. And so one of my jobs there was to also test. So what we test our reactions to hostage situations. And that being, so what you do there is, obviously the police force was informed, the prison warden was informed, but nobody else from the guards or the management or whatever was informed. And then you just keep one of the prisoners away from lockup, so that the count would be off. And so the head of security was always involved as well. And then my job then as a psychologist was to actually, so I'd go into the social worker's office or whatever, sit down with the social worker and say, okay, look, I'm taking you hostage now. And it's all via phone, so I'm calling up the central security part saying, hey, this is prisoner so-and-so, I want out, I'm having these demands and whatever else. And that situation alone, so it was very traumatizing for the folks on the other end of the phone, because they didn't know it was not real. But it was also, interestingly enough, that's why we went to psychologists doing that, was traumatizing for the hostage. Even though the hostage, it would be me and you sitting in the room, and this is a psychologist, and I'm just play acting this. But we had to debrief because they imagined themselves all of a sudden so much in the situation. Well, what this could actually be me, and what would that mean? And so we're what we were talking about earlier, how good our mind is in modeling and thinking things. I think we're good at the negatives as well. So we've never really had that problem that people, when they started building up these obstacles, that they were actually more meaningful than anything else. And that's also another interesting thing about the modeling, because one guy we were working with for 6 weeks, and I remember it was not, and usually we're not that directive, but there was no way about him getting this horse across this 6-inch diameter pole. There was no way.
What, do you remember what it represented?
It was, I think it was a firefight he was in.
Huh.
There was no way, and he felt helpless in that moment. I think that was a big thing, of just being overwhelmed and helpless in that moment. And I remember I got frustrated, and then I walked up. I said, "Here, give me the horse." And I took the horse and I moved away with the horse, and I said, it's only a damn pole. That's all it is, a damn pole. And I walked with the horse across. And he saw that and he's like, yeah, it's only a damn pole. And he took the horse and he walked across. And I think that helped him in that moment. And again, that's sort of the magic, because we don't normally do that. But I think that was the point for him where he said, you know what? I realized the firefight's been over for 10 years. It's in my head. Mm-hmm. It's only a pole and I'm making it into, it's over. So, you can use it for that kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I'm just trying to think, like, how could I use this myself? Like I told you, I have PTSD. One of the things that affect me on a daily basis is feeling like I'm being watched or followed, which I think a lot of veterans probably relate to, but I'm always looking in my rearview mirror. I'm always looking out the windows of my house, because at times in my life that has saved me. Yeah. I've watched cars that were following us in Afghanistan. I've watched people writing stuff down or taking pictures of us that later there was an IED in that same spot. So he was clearly just casing the place out. So like those skills, I'll call them, played out and helped me. But now in my civilian world, that was in 2015. 10 years ago, it's not serving me anymore, and it's just causing this lingering anxiety. So if I assign this pole to, hypervigilance or paranoia, you would call it, that would be hard for me to walk over.
Yeah. And one of the things that help, where the horses help there actually is for the anxiety part, is the calming. And so one thing that, it's also the ability to let go. It's also the ability to let go of something, because it has been a skill that's been so useful for you. And letting go of that skill, then maybe I might just be letting that skill go in the wrong moment, and somebody's planting a bomb right under my car.
This is what's going on in my head all the
time. Not that it's very realistic, because you're not watching your car right now, right? But or do you inspect your car underneath before you get
Not quite, no.
Okay, so but
at one point in my career, I was searching vehicles for IEDs.
Yeah. So the thing about it is, I think it's about letting go. And one thing that we use there, where the horses help, is that generally, like, we'll walk with the horses and go through the woods and whatever else, and they realize, I mean, if you're not, the horse is going to catch things. I mean, our sensory, we're sensory dullards, right? Humans are not very good at it. So horses are catching a lot more of what's going on in our environment than we are. And so a lot of the guys learn that, okay, if the horse is calm, I can be calm. I don't really have anything to worry about in that moment. And you can tell that when you're out riding, and there's a mountain lion somewhere or a bear or whatever, your horse is going to be reacting way before you even notice it. You're going to be like, what's up with my horse? He's all tense and this and that, and he's all antsy, and I don't know what's going on. And generally, if you start looking around, you're like, okay, all right, I get it. And so that the horses allow some of the soldiers there also to practice letting go, to just be out somewhere. So there's a exercise that we do. It's called safe space. And so they're to go out and to build a safe space, a feel-good space, a space that they feel comfortable with. And interestingly enough, some of the folks, and then spend time with their horse in that space. And so some will build up walls, and make it all tight. You got to make sure that, okay, access is blocked, and you got to go around this corner, and okay, I've got my fields of fire set up all over, and they try to spend time with the horse in there, and the horse is like, man, this is not cool at all. Right. And so what they realize is that, one, the horse is comfortable when it has other horses around it. And that's a problem that a lot of our soldiers have with PTSD, is they start isolating because it's safer But watching the horses, you realize, no, because I can't keep that vigilance up 24/7. I need to rely on others who also keep up a certain vigilance to help keep me safe. And then being with the horse and spending time with the horse, they can actually in some part just practice letting go. I don't know if that
makes perfect sense.
Letting go and just being in the moment and breathing deep, and not because when you're worried about an IED, or you're worried about, okay, I'm gonna go into this bar. Let me see. Okay, where are possible exits? Where can I sit against a wall? Where can people access? How can I gauge? You're not in the moment.
Mm-mm.
You're going through 100 different scenarios of what might be happening, and so the horses can help you actually be in the moment and stay in the moment.
Yeah, and then just from personal experience, you start to justify your actions. Like, this has worked for me in the past, and now I'm just in a bar in Colorado. Like, I don't know, man. I'm still just suspicious of those cars outside or those guys lingering in that corner. Yeah. It's stressful.
And there might be good reasons to be suspicious of guys lingering in a corner, but you have to transition from the battlefield to here.
Right.
And so, it's not going to be the 4 or 5 turban bearded guys in the corner that are going to be the problem. So, it might be the 6 biker guys. You might be correctly wary about certain things, but you have to transition again, be able to make a realistic threat assessment.
Right. Yeah. Well, we talked about 2 different theories as to why it works. First one was, the horse kind of will reject you if you're feeling anxious or you have an increased heart rate.
Or they're not necessarily reject you. Okay. They might actually even come to you.
Okay.
Yes. So that's another thing that we've found is that horses react. It's really interesting. I mean, I have a 6-year-old daughter, how horses interact with kids. It's really interesting. We had in one of our herds that we worked with, she was a very high-strung hunter jumper dressage horse, a sport horse, very well trained, but a warm blood, very reactive, and not people friendly at all. Because she was always used, I'd say, as a piece of sports equipment. So didn't like humans. Humans did things with her, and she did things for humans. But other than that, I was like, leave me alone, and I'm happy. And she was one of our most favorite therapy horses. And she picked the soldiers. So they'd go in and do interactions, and she always picked self-insecured individuals and would beeline towards them and actually and she was the herd leader. She was a herd lead mare and was very protective of them. So let's say after an interaction, it was really funny. I mean, and she was like 17 hands. So it's hard to look over her shoulders.
Right.
And this was a little soldier. He was very self-insecure. He'd be like, this kind of laughing. And we did a debrief with one of the things he did. We're like, well, this and that. And you could tell he was getting insecure. And Jens and I were standing on one side. He was standing on the other side. And this huge horse just pushed herself in between us and covered him. So we couldn't see him anymore.
Interesting.
And she just stood there. So we weren't even able to talk to him anymore at that moment. Protective. So it's not necessarily that they won't have anything to do with you. I think it's a lot about what kind of dynamics are in you, and is there a disconnect? Like horses will react to, or a lot of our horses will react to stuff that we lose the capability of seeing somebody being like overtly friendly. The typical mafia kind of thing, but actually has the intent of stabbing you in the back.
Right.
And horses are like, you can be overly friendly to a horse, but if your insides are like on aggression mode or something, they don't like that
friendly
at all.
With malicious intent.
Exactly. This kind of stuff. That's where they're like, no, you're not kosher with me, dude. This is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just, first theory is they just start to understand who you are. They may reject you. They may come help you if you're feeling anxious. The second was the obstacle theory with, you're assigning obstacles to these inner demons that you're having, these inner battles, and let the horse react with you or help you get over them.
Yes.
Is there a third one?
And objectify. And the third one, I think, is actually being the what we were talking about with the anxiety, the calming aspect of it is that I don't know your experience with horses. If next time you're feeling anxiety, go into a pasture with horses, sit down, and listen to them eat. There is nothing more calming than having these big animals around you, and you just hear this scrunch, scrunch, scrunch of them just fully calm and peaceful mode, just eating. So that's the other part, I think, is just this reconnect. I think we all, or a lot of us, have a disconnect with nature and being in the moment. And horses, obviously they're going to, in general, be in a more natural environment. So you're out and you're interacting with nature. You're acting usually in a fairly peaceful environment. And another thing that horses do, and this is also an interesting thing, we don't do that in a lot of our therapy, but I've used it before and utilized it before if someone can ride or ride a bit on the horse. But it's the size and presence of a horse, especially if you're not used to horses, forces you to be in the moment. Because you've got this big 1,000-pound animal next to you.
Kind of nervous in a way.
And you might be a bit nervous, you might be this, but you're going to be very aware. And that helps you sort of be in the here and now.
I see.
And then when you're aware in the here and now, and then you start interacting with the horse, and ideally the horse might start interacting with you, like reciprocal grooming and these kind of things, then you start feeling in the presence of, and there we might again be getting into the heart rate or whatever, but that really can calm you.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Just like simply petting or brushing a horse probably releases some good hormones within the human.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things we do a lot. We do that before we do anything else all the time with the horses, except the first time when we do the herd observation, is we'll do the grooming. And the grooming, and I always tell them that it's not about getting your horse prepped for riding, and it's not about inspecting your horse. That's why you usually groom. You get it prepped for riding, cleaned up, you inspect your horse, make sure the hooves are okay, make sure there's no other injuries to the horse. But that's not the point. The point is actually to groom the horse, and the horse will let you know pretty strongly if you've found a spot that the horse likes. Horses don't have hands, so we're very useful to them. And to linger there and to actually do some good for the horse. And if you do some good for the horse will start interacting more with you and doing you some good. And that having that animal sort of, nibbling at your back and rubbing up against you and everything, that I think that's just that's why we like petting dogs too. I mean, when we were in Afghanistan, you said you did EOD, right? Our EOD dogs, everybody loved them.
Yeah.
They'd come by. I mean, that was, you could have contact, you could interact, you could hug another being and feel,
And they wanted it too, because they were just as stressed as we were. Yeah.
So I think that part, but that's not horse specific. I think that's very animal specific per se. But
Yeah, I think we like animals more because they don't argue with us. They never have a conflicting interest. It's just love and respect and happiness.
Even though horses can argue with you, that's for sure.
How's that?
They can actually tell you very well when they don't want. Another interesting thing, I think the instantaneous feedback that a horse gives you is very, very, very good. I mean, so we had one example. We had a soldier come through who was very horse experienced. The first time we'd had that too, so I was really interested in seeing how that would work. So trained as a riding instructor, trained as a riding guide, had horses, had trained horses, and came to us and was also PTSD, but a lot of the moral injury part, a lot of bitterness, I've been wronged. Everybody's wronged me. And with a loss, I'd say the main problem was the loss of being able to see your own perspective in that, or your own, usually it's always two sides of a coin. It's not just everybody else is wrong, but you've done some things to exacerbate that. And that person had lost that sense at all. So it was just the world against me. And didn't see their own part in how am I making this worse. And so anyway, this is another exercise that we have. It's called Move the Horses. And so what you do with Move the Horses is you try it. That's relating to the horse and keeping that relationship. And that's also a very interesting thing as to how can I motivate a horse to, for example, jog with me, run with me. A dog I could theoretically drag along, a 1,000-pound horse. If that horse doesn't want to move, it's not going to move. I'm not going to get it to move. So I'm going to have to try and get into a rapport with the horse so that the horse starts moving with me. And then obviously going left and right and doing circles and figure eights and whatever else and stopping and backing up. And how can I get the horse to move with me and sync and to remove myself from the horse? And how far away can I move from the horse and still feel that connection? And you'll notice when the connection breaks. And so that's another interesting thing. There's the relationship part. And, anyway, but to get back to that example, so the person was like, okay, I'm gonna move the horse, and I'm a horse trainer, right? So, and very, very bitter, very one of those people where you were talking about earlier. You can feel it as a human too, right? And this was a person that you didn't really want to spend time with, right? Because you just noticed inside it was just, and the horse you was working with noticed that too, and so anyway, she wanted to show this wonderful, maneuver of how this horse is going to walk and move off of my body language. And the horse, we had a young corporal filming the whole thing, sort of broke away from her and was like, I'm going to mosey over to this young corporal. I feel more comfortable there. And that caused her to, what, you're questioning me? So she ran after the horse, grabbed the horse and moved it back over and was like, come on, you're going to do this with me. And that caused the horse to like, oh man, you're toxic. Ooh. Start running away or start trotting away. And then she ran after the horse. Like, okay, I'm gonna get the horse. And this is a really sweet horse. We use it for the family events. He has the kids on him, everything else. It's a super sweet horse. But he broke into a lope. And while he broke into the lope, he actually kicked out at her. Horses are really good at connecting or not connecting. It was a warning. Okay. But it was a definite warning shot close to the head. Like, if you keep on me, I will take your head off. Wow. And then he ran over to this young corporal and pretty much like tried to disappear in the kid's pocket.
Yeah. The horse.
The horse. Yeah. And so interestingly enough, what happened then was what had to happen. And again, we're going into the magic. So she started berating me and berating Jens. And this like, the horses you're using are not acceptable. They're not capable of working with PTSD patients. I'm a horse trainer. I know your horses are terribly trained. This is dangerous what you all are doing. This needs to be forbidden. I'm going to talk to command. Blah 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 blah. Man, and so it went all ballistic again. Everybody else's fault, not hers. And I was like, well, I don't know. I've never seen the horse react like that. Let me, he's it might have been something about you. But let me get him.
How'd she take that?
And that can't be. And this is the training. I'm like, and then I took the horse and I'm like, look, it took me a while to actually get him calmed down. It was like, he's doing things exactly like I want him to do. Why? Why not with you? What was wrong? And anyway, so that was how we broke. And I was like, okay, oh gosh, we're gonna have problems with command next week. Man. She's gonna complain, and this is all. And anyway, the next morning at breakfast, we were all sitting together. And she was too much of a horse person, I'd say, to ignore that.
She knew deep down.
Yeah, she did. And that was the thing. So she came up to me and she said, I was thinking all last night and I was super angry, but I was thinking, y'all are probably right. I guess it does maybe have something to do with me. What do you think? And we're like, wow. And, I could have talked with her, a super intelligent, staff officer. I could have talked with her. She could have talked circles around me about how everybody else is at fault and it's not hers. But that show of the horse saying, you know what? You're toxic. You're a problem, and I'm going to kick your head off if you keep doing this. Yeah. That was just something she couldn't ignore anymore, and it was not something that she could talk her way out of. Huh. And so that's again the magic of it. How horses will unmistakably reflect back to you in the relationship kind of setting, what's going on.
Yeah.
And you can use that a lot too with couples therapy, for example. You know?
I wanted to segue into how this is used in relationships. I saw in your study this is a huge thing in relationships. Yes. So let's get into that a little bit.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing. We'll do, you know, with whether it's communication or whether it's this, where it's like, where you'll have the wife, a lot of times the wife, you know, the male service member, but who's saying, you know, that's exactly how I feel.
Wow.
That's exactly how I feel because you're so toxic, you're so aggressive, or you don't listen. Or the other thing, what we'll do then, and this is when we start getting into, okay, we put people on horseback. So a lot of times, one of the interesting things is that in couples where the relationship is working, a lot of times the spouse who doesn't have PTSD sort of starts taking on everything because, you know, I mean, a lot of the guys are not capable of answering an email. They're not capable of structuring their lives, whatever else. And so they're like, okay, I've got to take care of everything. And so what we do a lot of times, and again, you can do like the obstacles, what are problems that we are working on, and they'll set it all up. And then we'll be like, okay, you know what? And then you'll see how they interact. And then a lot of times it'll be like, you know, the wife saying, okay, look, we got to do this and we got to do that. And let's, you know, and they'll navigate the obstacles. And then, so to get a change in perspective, what you can do is, for example, say, okay, why don't you let your husband do that? What do you mean? He can't. I said, well, maybe he can. Why don't you, what do you feel like? And why don't we do it this way? So it's without a sound. You get on the horse and he'll lead you through all these obstacles, and let's see if he can manage getting you there, you and the horse. So that's giving up a lot of control and actually putting trust back into
your partner,
to the partner, and the partner being able to actually step up to the plate and actually show, yeah, you know, I can do some things.
I see.
So these kind of things. So you can use it for that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Has there been any specific soldier or couple maybe in your time, you've been doing this for a long time, that was just very inspirational and it had a real life-changing effect on them that just comes to mind?
We've had, I mean, it's for us, it's pretty much the same probably when, if you get a chance, you should take a look at some of the stuff, but you're looking at it from the outside and you get the feedback from them, and the feedback is usually very exuberant, and it's wonderful, and this has done so much for me, or this has done so much for us, and this is great. And you're like, okay, well, I guess so. But you don't really know how impactful it was. And what we are actually is we are lucky in regards to we have, so usually with the individual soldiers, we'll do 6-week sessions, and we'll have like a WhatsApp group that they're in, and we keep the WhatsApp groups going. So, and we'll bring them back in. Most are active duty, so we'll bring them back in every once in a while to maybe, let's say, we'll do the 6-week individual session with them, and then we'll get them into a couples weekend, and we'll get them into a couples week that we do, or whatever, or a family week that we do. So we follow them along, and we can see in part what's happening, or they'll give us the feedback, and we've been lucky and blessed in that respect that we have had that feedback. We've got one guy, He's actually completed his all his training now here for the civil service. He's married. He's in a job. He just wrote us a long email and we only see ourselves as a small component in this whole process. We see us as like an adjunct therapy. We don't, by no means am I propagating that you come to us, you do 6 weeks of equine therapy and you're healed.
Right.
No. But we can help in certain aspects, whether it's in breaking through a plateau or getting new insights, or maybe being able to feel more in the moment, or what. Equine therapy can be utilized as part of the process. But he wrote, this is the last one that we had, it was just 3 weeks ago, a gigantic email. I said, I just completed all my training. I got good grades in that. I've now got a job in the civil service, and it was all mainly thanks to the equine therapy program. So we do get that, or we've had guys who say, like suicidality. I was at a 9 of 10 of wanting to kill myself, and I went through this, and I'm at a 2 of 10 now. So these kind of things we do have, but it's really hard to see the magic because you're not it happens between them and the horse. Really how impactful that is. I can tell you one of the first impacts for me that was one of the reasons when I was here in Colorado Springs learning it, why I wrote our Surgeon General and said, "Sir, you need to come out and look at this," was I was working with a young soldier, military sexual trauma, strongly depressed, and so I wanted to get one of the horses, and she had the propensity, it was like her third session, to always pick difficult horses out of the herd.
Right. This probably says something about her character.
Probably says something about her right there too. Yeah. And anyway, so this time, so there was at the equestrian center, there was a mule. No, not a mule, a donkey actually. Shirley the donkey, super sweet. You could cuddle her or do whatever, but as a donkey, super hard-headed. Definitely her own opinion, and that was it. And so anyway, she beelines to Shirley, and I'm like, oh, goodness. And starts loving on Shirley, and everything's wonderful, and cuddling her, and Shirley is wonderful for cuddling. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's get her haltered up and bring her over, and we'll start grooming her. And so she halters up Shirley, and I'm like, oh, boy, this is going to be a mess. And tries to move away with Shirley, and Shirley is not having anything of it. Not doing one step forward, backward, whatever. And she starts pulling on her, and that causes opposition reflex, meaning they pull back. Then she starts pushing on her and pushing from behind, and starts yelling at her. And I'm like, oh my God. And then she starts really, like, this is typical for my life. It's all effed up and everything I do, and boom, boom, and just goes out, a big gush, and she's in tears. And I'm like, oh, Lord, how am I going to get this thing anywhere where I need to get it? And so the only thing that I could think of to save myself was like, do we really have to move her? And then she stops and was like, well, I guess not. And then she just stays there, and she's crying and hugging this donkey and cries, and it gets better. And when these things happen, you just sit there and you wait, right, and see what happens. And for me, it felt like probably 3 hours. I don't know how long it felt for her. It was probably maybe 15, 20 minutes. I don't know. But then I noticed her brighten up, and she's like, oh, thank you so much. This was great. Thank you, Shirley. I think we're good for today. And pretty chipper, she goes. Right. She leaves. And I'm like, wow, what just happened? And so the next session, the next week, she came back, and I'm like, if you don't mind me asking, what happened last week? What were the dynamics? And she says, well, I have that a lot, that I just end up in a corner where everything is just black and nothing's working. And what I do then is I run away. I run home, I throw in my meds, and then I usually just stay home in the darkness for 2 or 3 days and just feel miserable. And staying with Shirley, I realized I don't have to run away, and I don't need the meds. I can actually stay, and it'll get better. So that
worked out. Yeah.
That's the power of it in part.
Yeah.
But it's something that, when you're observing, you're like,
you don't know.
You don't know what's going on. Goodness gracious. But there's a lot going on.
Through these examples you've given, both this one and the last one with this is the horse's fault, I see how this is working. I see how the horse is almost acting as a mirror to the soul. Yes. And then it might be hard for the person to look into that mirror and understand that it's my fault. I'm pushing this horse away, but it's the horse's fault. And you guys, I'm telling, I see it. I understand. This has been a really good explanation. Where do you see the future of equine therapy going? We were talking earlier, but I feel like Germany is way ahead of it because I was in therapy for 3 years in the military in, 2020 to 2023. And at no point was I ever offered equine therapy, but I know you guys are leaps and bounds ahead of that. And you're actually offering this as a legitimate modality to heal soldiers.
Well, I see it right now from the looks of it. And obviously I can't really talk to the study. The study's still going on. We've done our 50 clients, so we're done with our part of the study. We've got 2 civilian branches that are also doing it. So, but the preliminary results are looking good. They're coinciding with a lot of the other results that we have, or like what we had out of the couple study. So that means that at the moment our military will probably our, if you want to call it that, our general for PTSD, pretty much.
Right.
Who was that? The psychiatrist I was talking about earlier, our big expert.
Oh, right.
He's at the point now where he says, this has been showing so much promise, and not just equine-based, but the animal-based therapies, that he would like cooperations between our military hospitals. They're sort of divided up in Germany, Northwest, East, and South, and equine therapy providers. So hopefully that will let Jens and me as active duty personnel continue this job. Right now we're sort of doing it on the side. We hope that we might be able to do that more. And it's probably going to get to a point where at the individual, the study is not large enough per se, I would say, that it will go into the catalog of accepted treatment methods. We're not that far, where it's like a no-brainer. It's like, I don't know, let's say a knee endoscopic knee surgery costs $6,000. That's what it costs. Your insurance provider pays for it. Bam. We're not there yet, but it's to the point where, like, on the individual basis, your primary care physician, so for us it would be the doctor at the battalion aid station, so to speak, who's responsible for the soldiers in that unit, could say, I think you would profit off of that, and then could, on an individual basis, either send them to us as military, that then it doesn't cost anything, or actually the military will probably pay for a civilian provider for that individual. So it's not like commonplace. You will always have to how should I say? You will always have to apply for it on individual merits.
I see.
But so it's not a given, but generally it's accepted that yes, this does seem to bring something. So that's where we're going right now.
Okay. Yeah. That's refreshing to hear. I just think, through these examples and everything you've told me, hearing Billy Jack talk about it, doing it in like the 70s and 80s, it needs to be more popularized and normalized in healing for veterans, but everyone who's been traumatized.
Well, and that's what we're hoping for in general, is to, and we're seeing it. So right now, I mean, all the focus is on deployment related problems and everything else, and we've had a few soldiers come through simply because, like, our providers say, hey, I've got somebody super depressed, or I've got somebody hasn't had a deployment related thing, but who has PTSD because of, let's say, a bad accident or whatever. Could you take him through the program? I think it might help him. Mm-hmm. And it's shown it seems to work there as well. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to utilize it for more things. I mean, I don't know how it is in the States, but 25% right now of layoffs due to sickness or injury in Germany is mentally related. Mm-hmm. So whether you want to call it burnout or depression or whatever, but they're mental issues. And I think equine therapy could help in those areas, definitely. And I think also, on the other hand, using it as a resilience and team building tool. We're starting to look into that. That's something that we're trying to propagate as a next step for us in our military, is to use it. We've had talks with like 1st Battalion, 10th Special Forces Group on that, and actually the Navy SOCOM people who came and said, we don't really need like a therapy regimen, but like for like let's say for our SEAL teams or whatever, rotating in and out, like a week-long battery recharge would be good. And we've talked to our special forces about that. So the sort of these ideas that we're sort of looking at, can we maybe do something like that, offer these things? So there's still a lot of possibilities. And the other thing that we're still really have a problem with in our area, and that's why we founded Remount Germany, is as long as they're active duty, we can get then it's like TDY. So we're military, so it's no big deal if they can they get sent to us TDY. They get their lodging and their travel costs covered. We don't cost anything because we're on the military's dime anyway. That works. But for soldiers that aren't active duty anymore and that we can't reactivate for whatever reason, a lot of soldiers who end up with deployment-related problem will reactivate them to get them in therapy. But because we can't reactivate them, or family members, for example, they're not active duty, so there's nothing there to cover the costs. That's sort of where we got to the Remount Foundation Germany, or Remount Germany, is that we want to start getting money in for that, that we can actually pay for food, lodging, travel costs, and things of that nature for those people who the military, because I agree with you there, we're lucky right now that the military is actually paying for equine therapy for the active duty folks, right? So,
yeah, that's what I was saying. You guys are definitely way ahead of us, because I don't think there's any equine therapy program that's government funded or military funded, and you guys are already there.
Yeah. So yes, and we're very thankful for that, and we're hoping that we can expand that. So that's like the next thing that we're praying for.
Right. Yeah, earlier and before, you were telling me about your work with U.S. Special Forces, specifically 1st Battalion, 10th Special Forces, the group I was a part of. Tell me about your work over there in Germany with them.
That was interesting in regards to the work actually started here with Remount, with the Remount Foundation. While I was still over here, I think the wife of the command sergeant major of the 10th group reached out and said they were having a really, really bad deployment with tragically some fallen, and they needed to do something for the family. So they reached out to Billy, Jack, and to Jeannie, and so they started doing things with the families of 10th group here. And that sort of started, as far as I know, into like a fairly regular interaction. So when we started our equine therapy as part of the study, we were still based in Eastern Germany, and then we moved, mainly due to my wife and reasons of her job, to the Black Forest, and bought a little ranch there, and moved our part of the study to the Black Forest, because I'm sort of donating my horses to our military to use for that, for the study, through that, actually, it was the family coordinator for 10th group here, and I think it was Jeannie at the time that started talking and saying, hey, there is a equine therapy operation in the Black Forest, which is a 50-minute drive from Panzerkaserne. And for us, it was really interesting because we were actually hoping to expand the study and expand the work into NATO. So that's when actually through the chaplaincy there and through our chaplaincy, we actually started the first interactions. We had 2 families come for the family week. Then they did a brief for command, the commander at the time, and that's always the problem with the military. It's when the command teams change, you sort of restart everything. Yeah. But at that time, they were very, very positive toward it. Then we did like a resiliency measure where we brought the horses to the Thanksgiving event for the families of 110 at Panzerkaserne. Then we had actually a couple of ODAs who were transitioning out go through the program. That was, I would say, the best experience that we've had, because for whatever reason, it acts as a catalytic converter. German and American soldiers, and maybe because the Americans are more outgoing, more outspoken, whatever, it might be different if we used Norwegian or Estonian soldiers and German soldiers. Yeah. They might be seeing who could stay silent the longest. I don't know, but especially the mix, and I found that on deployments as well. It's always been really, really fun to work with the Americans. But that's sort of it sort of fed off of itself, and that is part of. I think that's also part of the healing process. Is that it's not when we do it. For example, we don't. It's not you come to us, we do the session, and then you leave. Mm-hmm. So they come to the ranch, and we're on military time anyway, so it doesn't matter for us. They come in the mornings, and they might do some ranch projects. They'll do their therapy sessions. They'll hang around in the afternoon. They're like, hey, can we barbecue? Like, yeah, sure, barbecue, whatever. So they'll hang out in this environment all day and talk shop.
Right.
And that was very, very helpful, I found too. I mean, I think the talking shop and going through, okay, these are my problems, and oh yeah, you've got similar problems and everything else, that helps in general. And I think the multinational aspect of, oh, you're American, you're an operator, you do that, but you've got those problems too, and I've got I found that was probably the best 6-week sessions we've had, and that's restarted again. I mean, obviously, you know this better than I do. I mean, if anybody's at the forefront, the tip of the spear, right? If there's deployment stuff going on, then all of a sudden, so there was a bit of a lag in that, thanks to Ukraine. Then again, but it's restarted. Mm-hmm. So we've had another soldier go through our last 4-week session. I think for the next session we'll have somebody go through. So that's working out nicely.
Okay. Do you have any other partners, like other countries, who are starting to express interest and maybe reach out to learn? Because like we've been saying, you guys are definitely at the forefront of this.
Well, actually, and that's a bit of a shame, is who reached out to me, and that was through Rupert Isaacson. It might be interesting to have him on the show one of these days. Yeah. He's the founder of Horseboy. A journalist, New York Times bestseller on this. A lot of work with autistic kids, but also, and it's a lot of putting people on the horses and oxytocin release and everything else, and getting people into the moment and how that works, and works for PTSD too. And that's a whole nother workability aspect. If we have the time, I don't know if we have the time that we could get into what happens there, but.
Well, we can get into that. We definitely have time. Yeah, let's do it.
But now I just lost my thread. Why I got to Rupert Isaacson.
But how does that work?
How does that work? Mm-hmm. So the general idea about it is, and so he's got a program set up. He's very much into the classical dressage and into the Portuguese riding style. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the piaffe, for example. The piaffe is when the horse sort of dances. It moves, it's sort of like a strong trot almost in place.
Okay, so that's like the actual movement. I'm familiar with dressage, but that's like the overarching term.
And well, the dressage, the overarching, and that's one of the movements, when the horse sort of dances like this.
Yep.
And if you have an anxious horse, they might sort of lope in place or whatever because he wants to go somewhere. And Rupert trains the horses to do that on cue, and sets people on the horse. And the idea behind it is that supposedly autistic kids, and that's how it started with his son who was very strongly autistic, have like a sensory overload. And if we know anything, is that when you're in a sensory overload, so you're very agitated because of what's hammering in from the outside, the last thing you can do is learn. The last thing you can do is interact. So what the movement of the horse does is it stimulates the psoas muscle, which are the deep muscles in the hips, and that causes an oxytocin release. Oxytocin release is obviously the birth hormone. That's so it's a feel good hormone that relaxes you and takes away pain and stress. And they found that kids on horses when they have this oxytocin release, get calmed. And because they're calm, they can start learning and interacting. And the thing is, the theory behind it is that seems to work for PTSD as well.
Yeah, I can see.
Because PTSD, I'm also in a agitated state, of anxiousness and anxiety, right? Everything could be jumping out at me, attacking me.
I feel overstimulated.
Right.
Yeah.
Overstimulated, and I can't learn anything. I can't do anything. I can't access things. So when I'm on the horse and the horse is doing this movement and it calms me, then I can start accessing things and processing things. So that's the idea behind that, of getting a person on a horse to do that. To help with the processing.
And this is kind of different from hippotherapy.
Yes, that's different from hippotherapy, but it's the same thing. It's on the horse. It's not, yes. So again, that means that's a whole different set of things that you, catalog of requirements for the horse. For the groundwork, I can use any horse.
Okay.
They can be sometimes the worst, in hyphens, asshole horse there is. Can be interesting for work because it tells me something about the person who picks it. We've had that.
Yeah.
I want that horse. Why do you want that horse? Well, because he's an asshole. And that's exactly what I am. That's exactly what I feel.
Yeah.
I hate the world.
Those are the kind of partners that I pick.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. But that's not necessarily a horse you would want to put somebody on. So that means that, the horses for that kind of work, you need to, they need to be trained, and obviously training them up to the Piaffe it's a high form of training if you want to do that. I don't think they need to necessarily Piaffe the regular movement. Piaffe makes it better, easier, but regular movement is okay as well for that. And you can test it. Put one of your kids or whatever on a horse, walk next to him, and I do that with my daughter all the time when I pick her up from kindergarten, and I'll ask, How was your day at kindergarten? It was fun. What was it? What happened? I don't remember. And if we have the possibility of actually picking her up with a horse from kindergarten. And if I pick her up with a horse and she's on the horse, she'll talk like a waterfall.
Man, what a cool experience to be picked up in kindergarten on a horse.
Yeah, I do that every once in a while. That way I get to know what happened during the day. Because she can access things then all of a sudden. She's on the horse, and I think the movement sort of calms her, and then she starts talking. How
many horses do you got?
We have 5.
5?
Yeah.
Wow. So what's paint a picture of your property in Germany. It sounds beautiful.
It's large for German standards, small for American standards. We have a total of 5 acres, 5-acre property. We have the ranch house, if you want to call it that, where we live. Then next to that, we have a large barn and stables with 5 stables for the horses, but the horses are generally not stabled. So the horses live outside most of the time. We live in the Black Forest, so we do get cold, nasty weather sometimes. I think in general, if we bring them in for 5 days out of the year, 10 days, it's a lot.
Oh, okay.
Horses can deal with the cold. That's easy. They just can't deal with cold and wet. And Germany does get cold and wet sometimes.
Sure.
So if you've got 3 or 4 days of 30-degree weather, 34-degree weather, and it's wet and they get soaked through, it's the same if you're out in the field. That's not fun, right?
Yeah.
It's the same for the horses. They can't warm up anymore. And then they'll usually let us know that they want in. And then we'll give them a 24-hour break where they can stay inside and lay down and dry off. But generally, they're on the property. And what we have on the property, it's we've got it set up to what they call a paddock trail or paddock paradise.
Okay.
Meaning they have an open stall or a loafing shed that they can access. They can lay down in there. It's closed off with 2 openings, so they can get out of the sun, they can get out of the wind or whatever. And then they have a 400-yard track that goes around the property that they have access to all year. And on the other, and so where the loafing shed is where they have their the water. And on the opposite side is where they have the feed. So they have to walk 200 yards no matter what to get to the food, simply because horses are like we are. If they can sit on the couch and eat, they'll sit on the couch and eat. So that sort of forces them to move. It gives them a chance to run if they want to. And off of that, we have different pastures. And we'll open and close the pastures just for pasture management. So they have that 400-yard track plus their one open area all the time. And then usually starting in May, we'll open up the different pastures so they have access to the pastures as well.
Sounds beautiful, man. I haven't been out to the Black Forest specifically. I've been in the Panzer area, Ramstein a little bit.
There you go. Okay.
But just in passing to deployment. Right. So yeah, we just went out, had a beer, and that was my Germany experience. It was a long night, though.
You were close. You were close.
Yeah. Well, we'll close up here, but tell me about, you said you've been around horses pretty much your whole life. Tell me about your early memories of being introduced to a horse.
Okay, my experiences with the horses.
Like your earliest memories as a child. Not a lot of people can say, like, in childhood I was around horses, so that must have been pretty special. Well, I
didn't grow up with horses. My earliest memory actually was we were stationed in. And my stepdad, he actually, when he was young, he rodeoed. So he, when we were stationed out in Fort Bliss, Texas, that was my first memory of horse. We were out at a ranch for a ride, and I remember my dad was like, "Okay, the only thing you have to do when you're on a horse is just make sure you stay on. The horse will stop, do whatever. It's not going to kill itself." That was his opinion at the time. You just have to stay on. And we were out in the desert around El Paso, and horse took off with me. That was my first memory of horses.
You're just holding on. I
remember my dad said, "Just stay on." So I just stayed on. The horse just ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. And then sooner or later, he stopped in somewhere in the desert and started grazing on a few tufts of grass that were out there. And a long time later, my dad came out with his horse and picked me up. So that was my first experience with a horse. And ever since then, so because of him, we'd go riding every chance, but we didn't have horses. And then about when I was 8, we were in Fort Leonard Wood, actually. Fort Leonard Wood. I had talked my dad into getting me a dirt bike.
Nice.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
I'm a big dirt biker, man, so we can get into it.
I talked him into that, but the thing was, he said, "Well, okay, I'm all for it. You can do that, but talk to your mom." And that's when the night stopped. So, so I was like, "Yeah, Dad said I could have a dirt bike, but what do you say?" And she's like, "Oh my gosh, no."
So you never got one?
I never got a dirt bike, but her idea then was, for whatever reason, she thought horses were safer.
Yeah, at least they can sense your emotions. A dirt bike has no idea.
and they're good with kids generally. So what happened then was they had like a riding stable and a riding academy for kids at Fort Leonard Wood. And she was like, "Well, why not ride?" And I was always a big cowboys and Indians. And I thought that was really cool. And so that's when I started actually riding. So I did 2 years of regular riding. I think it was like three times a week or something like that. And then after that, I've always, wherever I could get my hands on a horse, I would ride a horse. Mm-hmm. So I was never really a good rider, but wherever I could, like one of my fondest memories actually of riding was I was doing a stint in the Middle East, and then went to Egypt and rented a horse there and rode to the pyramids in Giza, and from the pyramids in Giza, then through the desert to Saqqara.
Wow. You got any pictures of that?
I had, this is like before the digital age. Sure. So I have them up here.
That's beautiful.
So everywhere we went, or everywhere I was, if I could access horses, I'd ride. And our really getting into horses was, I'd say that started with my wife. My wife is sort of the typical pony girl, always wanted horses when she was a kid, used every chance she could to ride. And then in 2006, that was sort of like the first time, we were both working, everything was okay, and we could maybe afford a horse. That's when she bought her first horse, so 2006. And that was generally like for everybody. It's if you buy a horse, usually the first horse you buy is the wrong horse. That's actually one of our best therapy horses. That's the warm blood that I was talking about earlier, but the one that doesn't like people. Very highly trained horse that we bought, went through like 4 or 5 different owners before we bought her. Was used, like I said, before we had her as a sports equipment more than a horse. Right. And was too much horse for both of us. And so what happened was after we had some pretty bad issues, my wife had been tossed a couple of times. And for me, I continued riding her till my dad's philosophy of, the horse is not going to get both of you killed. You just have to stay on, proved wrong. And what happened was I don't know what happened. We were riding out, and she spooked, and she turned to a runaway horse, and I couldn't get control of her anymore. And we had like these steep dams, and she galloped up the dam with me, and then we were racing along the top of the dam, and we were talking maybe like 100-foot down and very, very steep. And then she went down the dam with me, careening down there, and we almost both fell. And I was like, oh my God, she's going to kill both of us.
Wow. And
then she ran back up the dam, and that was my chance because it slowed her down to bail. So I just jumped off. And that was the point where I was like, okay, horse riding can be dangerous.
A dirt bike, you can at least try the throttle.
Yeah, exactly. You can control the dirt bike with the throttle. And I'm big into motorcycles. So yeah. And so after that, we... I still took lessons on her. My wife didn't ride her at all, but everywhere we were, my wife was still like, okay, this is not our horse. Let's get on these horses and let's ride. My wife was very much, this horse scares me, our horse, but other horses don't. So she's like, come on, let's lope, let's do this, let's do that. And I was like, well, if that horse could kill me, all horses could. So I was a bit wary of all horses. And what happened then was, I think it was after one of my deployments, actually, 2012 or 13, we were doing a motorcycle trip through the West. And we stopped at a ranch in Colorado. And it was this former bronc rider, half Apache cowboy who rode out with us. He just totally impressed me. His whole way of thinking about life, and, all you need is a good truck. All you need is decent tack. You got to, good tack that somebody spent 6 months making and putting a lot of effort in, and a good horse, and that's all you need in life. And he so impressed me, and the riding impressed me, that I was like, I think we should get back into it, but let's get back into it right. And so then we really started again with a lot of formal training, and probably bought our first horses. Well, we still had our one horse, but our first riding horses, proper ones that were suited to us, maybe 2 years after that. And actually, the horse that I bought, I trained I wouldn't say myself, but what happened was we bought it from our trainer. She was unridden, and I was like, you know what? If you're gonna train the horse so I can ride it, but why don't you train me as the crash test dummy? So instead of you doing it, you tell me what I need to do, and I'll ride it. Right. And so that's how all that started. And ever since then, it's gone from a hobby to a way of life. And with the equine therapy part of it, it's turned into an absolute passion as well.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Last thing I'll ask you is, what would you say to a veteran who's been listening, is struggling, has tried a lot of things, but not equine therapy? How might you encourage him to try it out?
Pretty much the same way that we encourage our folks to try it out is on the one hand, if you can obviously find a provider who does it, to definitely go for it. And if you don't, and that's again, what is the magic sauce in all of it, or the magic ingredient in the sauce, is we tell our guys, if you can be open, and surprisingly in Germany that works, even though I said, the Germans are very skeptical about the military. Go to a horse operation, and be honest about your problems. and just ask if you can spend time around the horses and maybe help out. Because this sounds weird, I know, for somebody who doesn't have horses, but even picking up the poop is therapeutic.
Explain.
It's you're in the moment, you're doing something, you can see that you've done something. It's like, if you want to change the world, make your bed, right? You can see, from where you started, where you end, that you've actually cleaned something. It doesn't take a lot of thought. You can sort of just be out there, be in the moment, pick up poop. You're out in nature, and it's calming, believe it or not. And generally we found so when we go through our sessions, it's always, we'll usually have 4 soldiers going through at the same time. And at least one says, this is not enough for me. I want more contact with horses. And they do exactly that. They'll find a stable and say, hey, I've done some equine therapy. I'm a veteran struggling with PTSD, or active duty struggling with PTSD. Spending time around horses does me good. Could I help out a little bit and spend some time in the pasture or petting horses or whatever? And they usually kick in open doors. So that's what I'd actually suggest, that even if you don't have equine therapy around you, just something to help ground you, to be out with the horses, that does a lot of good sometimes. Just that, to just go out, be open about your problems. And, most places are happy if you're not looking at one of these top sport dressage things where they're like, we don't have time for you, dude. We've got, most places are very open to helping veterans out, and they're happy for a bit of help a lot of times, and then you might be able to groom some of the horses, might even be able to walk some of the horses. And that can be very therapeutic.
Well, Alex, I really appreciate you coming on the Veterans Voice podcast. This has been really informative. I have the utmost respect for you and your career and the work you're doing, so please continue doing it, because we all need it.
Well, Taylor, thank you very much for having me, and we hope that we will be able to continue it. That's our big hope, that this goes into the next to the next level. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a huge advocate of it. Like I said, I talked to Billy Jack before you. He put me in contact with you, and I haven't experienced it myself, but just hearing these stories, I'm very inspired to spread the word. So
you should come out and experience it too.
I will. Seriously. I'll take you up on it. All right. Well, thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Taylor.
Let's say bye in German.
Ja, Taylor, danke schön, dass ich hier bei dir zum Podcast sein durfte, und ich sage allen Hörern auch vielen Dank fürs Zuhören und tschüss, vielleicht bis zum nächsten Mal, vielleicht mit den Pferden. Ciao.
Ciao.
That's Italian, but yeah, okay. The Germans say that a lot. Tschüss. Tschüss is what the Germans say. Tschüss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oder Auf Wiedersehen is the classical one.
How's that?
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
To see you again.
To see again.
To see you again. Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Yeah.
Okay. I got it down.
There you go.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Tim.